Hello, it's almost, I think it's 1 o'clock, so we will get started. So thank you everyone for coming. I'm an assistant professor of architecture in the Department of Architecture and Built Environment. And today we are organizing this cinematic workshop called Her Cities, looking at gender, urban spaces, and the right to everyday life. And we will hear a public lecture from Zhuozhang Li, and we will also watch 2 movie screening after it and having discussion. So some housekeeping rules. We are now at 401, which is big lecture hall. So if you need immersion exit, it's the door on your right-hand side. It's the one you left the theater and you will see it. And if you need to use toilets, you need to go through the door in the middle, and it's in the middle of the building. So it started about 2 years ago, right, Nadia? So at that time, we got this internal funding by Northumbria University, and we started this gender inclusive cities exploration. So together we did multiple gender walks, we did cinematic workshops. So this year we just want to continue the activity. So the Her City workshop is funded by Vice Chancellor Diversity and Inclusion Fund. So it's have myself, who is an urban researcher, and I use digital media to understand disparities in the city. I have an ongoing AHRC project to look at the brown to green transition with the local people to understand their perspectives and the comments with the urban planning and the waterfront regeneration. And the gender inclusive city is my project more focused on the gender disparities in urban space. And then I want to invite Nadia, who talk about her research as well.
Oh, nice. So yeah, I'm Nadia, and I'm very happy to be back and see so many familiar faces. I used to work and do my research and teach at Northumbria University until April this year. I'm now based in Italy at the University of Pavia. I'm an architectural theorist, and my work very much focuses on feminist design practices in the city and challenging what is, the idea of an architectural design in principle. So some of you already know I'm very much engaged with environmental feminism as well, and I started this work with Jennifer a couple of years ago, although most of the work is done by Jennifer, I must admit to this. So, yeah, we will talk later again. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Nadia. And Grace, would you like to pop up?
Hi, I'm Grace. I'm based at the Guangzhou Business School, and I'm a feminist organizational scholar. And my work lies upon mostly gender work and organization. And I most often employ feminist epistemologies, critical theories, theoretical underpinnings to analyze and interpret marginalized experiences in varying organizational settings. And also, I'm part of the Writing Differently collective, which is kind of advocating for different writing styles for academic articles, which is also underpinned by feminist epistemologies to, for instance, to get to know what we know, what we learn, and knowing and knowing, learning and learning from the margins, those kind of things. And yeah, that's basically about me. And I'm very happy to contribute to this gender inclusive project. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. We also have Angelica here. She is an interdisciplinary technology researcher. Her work is around human-computer interaction for participatory action research through design and creative practice. Unfortunately, Angelica is not here, but she will probably join us for the second workshop. And here we also got Ke-Xin, who was my research assistant from last year, and she got a fully funded PhD position at the University of Warwick. So, and she will join for the second workshop as well. So last year, with Nadia, we did this workshop as a Star and Shadow Cinema, which is more like a grassroots cinema in near the Uspan area, and it turned out to be a very successful session. So this year, we just want to continue these activities and have some reflections looking into gender disparities with urban space. And now I will introduce the speakers today, which is Zhuozhang here. Zhuozhang completed his PhD in architecture 2 years ago at the Center of Architecture and Visual Arts at University of Liverpool. His research is established as the intersection of urban study, visual cultural study, and critical theory. In 2022, you joined the UCA, University of Creative Arts, and has delivered multiple lectures, tutorials, studio crits, and workshops at several places, including the Liverpool School of Architecture, Sheffield School of Architecture, Hong Kong Academic of Film, Bauhaus, Beijing Institute of Technology, and Guangzhou Academic of Arts. Along research and teaching, his recently curatorial and artistic practice, including trees under surface in Beijing and Entre Flores in Granada in Spain, a shifting model of publicities in Cultural UK. Knowledge is power in Tate Liverpool, and currently he's also an honorary research fellow at the University of Liverpool. I know Zhuozhang through his PhD supervisor, Dr. Chen, at Liverpool University, and his doctoral thesis, The Fluid City, a cinematic urban tectonic study on the reproduction of publicity in contemporary Hong Kong, investigates the social spatial production of everyday urban space in the city in the past 4 decades through a lens of urban cinema. I'm sure you will share more insights of your PhD research and recent publication with us. So please join me to welcome Zhuozhang for his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jiayi and Grace, and yeah, thank you for having me here. Should I talk to? I guess that's more than enough introduction, so I'll just start with my talk. And today, the title is called "A City of One's Own: On the Difficulty of Imagining an Ideal City." The idea of this title and the lecture comes from inspired by 2 literary works. One's by Woolf, as we all know, Room of One's Own. Another one's by George Perec in a poetry called On the Difficulty of Imagining an Ideal City. So for me, I found it's quite like these 2 works kind of summarize very well these kind of intertwined topics in the talk today, also in my research in general. Yeah, sorry, that should be. And departing from there, the lecture today is structured in 3 parts: a city where there is no room, a city of one's own, and then a city of no one's own. And starting from the first, I will start this by sharing a debate and controversial interview about the film The Power of Dog, like last year, I think. Some of you may remember in this interview, the actor Sam Elliott was basically attacking the film Power of Dog, saying it's the film kind of provide a false portrait of the American West, and seen with all those naked dancers and the man without shirts, all those kind of homosexuality in the film, and that is not American West, and he got very offended. But then if we think about what is American West, it's normally this idea of like as a terrain with this cowboy, with this very masculine man, and a hero normally like save other people's life. Normally it's a female with a white dress as well, like typical image. And then the cowboy is often a very tough guy in this no man's land, and then making his own rules. And in Power of Dog, this West has been challenged by this kind of sense of queerness in the film, and maybe that's the reason why Sam and also many other people also who attacked Brokenback Mountain a few years ago as well. Like that's why it got so angry, because for them this kind of queerness and homosexuality shouldn't be there, shouldn't appear in that land of the West. And then in another film called Tu Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julia Newmar, it's a great film, by the way. And when the sheriff of the police was trying to catch a group of drag queens running away, he made a list of a few places where the drag queens or the gays would appear. As you can see on the list, it is the flower shops, the ballet school, and restaurant for brunch, and antique stores. It's quite interesting in the sense like for the sheriff or maybe for the actor Sam Elliott, who was so angry of Power Dogs, the gays should appear in these kind of places rather than the American West. But then, of course, we're also so familiar and so like known this so well, like in many films, the cinematic depiction of housewives, normally their life is appear in the suburban area. It's in USA, in many other regions as well. And then it seems like here is underlying agreement, so-called agreement, is like American West is not for a group of people. And then the housewives, their social life, everything, the story is happening in the suburban area because the city, it's tough. It's a boys' town. It's a mean street, as this Martin Scorsese film title called. And then when a woman or when enter this territory of boys' town, or the drag queens enter the small town where the sheriff was trying to treat them in the Midwest of USA, like normally they have this kind of feeling of unwelcomeness or this kind of feeling like you don't really belong here. In this film by Anton, I always have difficulty to pronounce his name. But yeah, La Ventura, which was adopted in the TV series White Lotus, very classic scene, is when Monica left and then became alone in the street, and suddenly, yeah. As we all can feel that kind of pressure, that kind of invisible, I mean, also very visible gaze, but also that invisible, like, I shouldn't be here, that kind of feeling. In the sense of thinking, like, when obviously there's a separation, or in that kind of like, like when the outside, in the world, outside the suburb, outside the home, outside like domestic space, and it's always a danger zone. It's always a space of like pressure, it's space of with gaze. And this is actually a spatialization in the sense of this kind of unbalanced power structure in the sense between the dominating gazer and the object of the gaze, constantly reminding us and reminding like the people who shouldn't be there. And this then indicates a separation of the out and the in part of the public and private realm in the city, a separation between this kind of subordinate, private, female realm of reproduction, of home, of housework, and the dominant public male realm of production and leisure, as the flaneur and walking in the city or enjoy the city. Well, when the boundary of this kind of separation got broken, it comes to the moment of discomfort. Sometimes could be the cowboys of the West who feel they are threatened of this intruder, and sometimes, most of the time, it's the intruders ourselves feel like we are not really welcome, feel like it's not really our space. And this separation, again, suggests a certain model in the sense a model that everyone better follows with no alterations, with no alternatives, which they could easily fall into the pitfall of the formation of this kind of hegemonic discourse, hegemonic power, as the model itself says. And when the boundary, and then in this film, it's quite a nice film as well, Una Mujer Fantástica. The scene I'm going to show you, it shows the protagonist, Marina, a transgender woman walking on the street. And I'm just going to play it first. Compared with La Ventura, which was more like figurative, this one is more abstract, but also much more metaphorical in the sense of you feel this wind, the powerful, the weight of social judgment, the weight of or the power of this hegemonic discourse want to sweep away anything unwanted and desirable as her living alone in that city, and and then as we all know that this discourse is not only about gender. It's not just a gender discourse. In many sense, like the list of unwanted and undesirables could keep expanding under this hegemonic discourse, and in this city, like there's no room for you, and this photo actually shows a public space in Hong Kong. I took it in 2017, 2018. It's a public park, but it is, as you can see, there's so many things you cannot do there. You cannot play instruments. You cannot walk your dog, and there's in different parks you have different rules. And then, what does it really mean when a public open space have so many restrictions and, in the sense, under rigid urban management, and for what? Are they really just want to kind of achieve this kind of purified urban ideal? It's clean, and then there's no one actually using it. As Richard Sonnett argues that by establishing a projective need with rigid principles, this kind of exclusion and purification is actually based on rejection of complicity and the fear of losing control. That's why there's no dogs. That's why there's no such activities, because they know it's very difficult to manage. And that will be and now the second section is I want to talk a few examples of how actually people, what do they do actually when in the city where there's no room for them, and what's their action, what's their practices, in the sense, how do they claim and make the city of their own. And I will start with the case of domestic workers in Hong Kong, which was one of the main cases in my PhD thesis. And many of them on every Sunday gathering and in the central area, especially this picture, it's under the headquarters of HSBC Bank Building. It's quite powerful contrast. And for most of the domestic workers, they work 7 days a week, cooking, cleaning, and nursing, and taking care of all the family members, taking care of the kids, sending the children to the school. That's their 6 days life. On Sunday, they have that kind of temporary freedom and space to have a rest and gather with their friends. So they actually play a quite important, very important role in the quotidian life, in everyday life in a city. However, it's quite questionable of their citizenship in a sense, like in a city, because they are much needed, but yet they are needed out of sight, because sometimes they are just as kind of like a helper and a servant in the sense, you are part of my life, but we don't want to see you in our city. That's why there are many protests and many demonstrations for them. Even when when they started gathering in the 1990s in that central area in Hong Kong, because on Sunday the bank is closed. Then it's an empty urban space. Why we cannot go there and then sit meet our friends? But when they appear there, and then there was a huge backlash because, oh, like you just occupy the space and eating there and drinking there, you are not really high class. It's not the image of the central of Hong Kong. It's not the image of the bank, of the headquarters. So you shouldn't be here. And that was a series of protest demonstration back and come and go and things. And in the end, after decades of debates, like about their rights to use the urban space, they are currently allowed to occupy some public areas like central, but very like specific areas in the passage bridgeway, as long as you don't disturb other pedestrians. And as you can see in one film called Still Human, shot by Chen Xiaojuan in 2018 in Hong Kong. During this process of spatial transformation, as you can see, they just use cardboards, occupy the bridge or the square, have very private like space, temporary space for that day. After that, they will just pack everything and then leave. And on Monday, everything, the city goes back to its original plan. So in this process of spatial transformation, cardboard is widely used, like for mats, for walls, and have this kind of territory of obtaining a sense of privacy. And you can see on the back, you have the pedestrian flows all the time going, but it's just very simple material and very simple technique. Basically, they use tapes, and sometimes we see sometimes with a pen, just with the cardboard with a pen, put a hole and then use tapes. Just it's anyone can do it, and it's at any time in a sense. But then this kind of very low tech, very informal way have such a contrast in the sense with all the normal foster buildings, with all the formal urban plan. But if we look deeper of this contrast, it is not just in terms of architecture formality or informal urban structure, but it is also about this kind of contrast between the practice of domestic workers and also the terrain of public realm, the terrain of this public discourse. It is related in the sense to this contestation between the projected of domestic workers in the private realm and the man's world, the boys' town. As the painting before shows how that power structure relationship has. And then here I would like quote I'm going to quote Judith Butler. In the sense, like when she talk about from the feminist perspective to understand public space, understand this contestation between public and private, and she argues that like how we move through public space in a way that contests the distinction between public and private. Like it is about how we actually reconfigure the matter of this material environment, how we actually actively transform and function and refunction it based on our own needs, and based on, in that sense, the material environment itself is not fixed. It is fluid and it is able for you to interrupt And another case in Hong Kong is this one is much more temporal in the sense it is not like occupy the center of the Hong Kong, and then but this one is about the dancers in Hong Kong. It's a film called The Wei Wei Dance in 2013. So as the picture I showed before, in the public park, you cannot play instruments, you cannot walk your dogs. Obviously, you cannot do any hip-hop dancing and things without like sponsor, without. So what did they do is, as you can see in this clip, think from just imagine what you were watching. Imagine this supposed in another city is supposed to happen on the ground level with parks, with you have the streets and dancing. But what they did from the restaurant to the corridor to the rooftop, you can see all the city, the land, the other high-rise building in the background. This clip, this clip kind of visualize this possibility of urban space being appropriated for other alternative uses. And for them, they noticed that, they saw that, and then they have a clever utilization of the opportunity presence. But at the same time, if we look at this kind of relationship between strategy and tactical as a body movements, it is also a response, a direct response to that rigid control, to that management, in the sense of it's not really like romanticized in the sense of they have a clever utilization, they have a knowledge to use it, they are so free dancing in the city. In many cases, they are forced to use this kind of space. And that's, in the sense, sometimes also kind of how we make a city of our own. Sometimes, in many cases, we are forced to find a way of surviving, in the sense, rather than really, yeah. I think it's very important to not romanticize this kind of informal practice and body movements rather than just, yeah. And another similar clip is by the research office called MAP office in Hong Kong University, two architects. They did a very, very similar clip called the Runscape.
Each move is a different experience. It's a continuous trip. It's a way to feel the city. My body is a ball out of control, full of control, conscious of its environment. My body is my weapon.
It is through these bodily movements, like your body, as we were saying, the body is like a bullet, and the body is like a ball to interact with this built environment. And in that, also in the way, by jumping into the air, by that kind of freely movement, the city itself, the built environment, becomes this kind of sense of canvas, of my own canvas, and I draw and I paint in a way through my own body. And that practice itself, as in this video clip, they also said about a quote: "Landscape is a political response to the current privatization of our cities, when running remains the only unbounded space in the urban field. It reveals alternative route to the globalized and controlled urban space, and it's by this transforming the street into a playground, and it becomes a way of reclaiming the city, of reclaiming this highly controlled city." Then the third section I want to talk about, after all this, talking about reclaim the city, what I really want to talk about is like in this section, it's a city of no one's home, and like the city is not really for anyone, and it may sound a bit confusing after I said that we need to make the city our own, but I think in this section, what I really want to discuss is this kind of ambiguity of this phrase, the city of one's own, and also the making the city of our own. It's that the danger of, if we just take it very literally, it's my own city. I will start, go back to more architecture space, more domestic spaces, back to Wolf's novel, and also start with this domestication of Frankfurt kitchen. It was a modern kitchen designed by a female architect for women. And spatially, it is quite have done a very good job. It's very efficient and quite productive. But then this kind of pursuit of being productive and being efficient also in a way maintains, reinforces this established gender relationship, gender rules, like you become it's not like it changes anything, just you become a much better housewife in the sense, rather than really like relieved from that relationship, that structure. And in that sense, it's not reinforces this particular hegemonic discourse in many ways. So when there are many people commenting like Frankfurt kitchen is a kitchen for the modern woman, what do they really mean by that? It's just yes, as I said before, a modern version of this painting, but nothing really changed. And that's the separation I mentioned before, the separation of that private domestic female drum and the male boys' town. That separation still continues. And then secondly, we cannot neglect that the underlying relationship when we see like a room of one's own or a city of one's own, the underlying relationship between ownership and capital and that kind of sense of owner and property. Of the question like who are able to make the room of their own. And for Frankfurt Kitchen, apart from the reinforcement of this hegemonic gender relationship, the model of modern kitchen would also neglect, as I highlighted here, neglects the class differences and the cultural differences in the sense like many poor German families, they will gather in the kitchen, sleeping there. But then for the designers, for that high efficient, like ideal model, that's really unhygienic and it shouldn't continue. And then this kind of sense of when we see a room of one's own, it's all when it's a city of one's own, we all talk about whose city, whose room it is. And then this kind of one specific figure, certain figure, ideal, one certain ideal. So when also for Wolf, when she mentioned like a woman must have money and a room of her own, we always focus on a room of her own. Sorry. We always focus on the second part, but forgot the first part is a woman must have money first. But there are many scholars have already criticized this many times in the sense of the neglection of race, different racial groups and different classes in that work. And it is a great work, but when we really think about references, we need always be conscious of this underlying argument. And as I said before, like for many people, it is a particular academic arrogance to assume that all the. I think here it's not just about discussion of feminist theories, and also many urban theories, architecture theories. It's like we examine them without knowing our differences and without a significant input from. It's in this case, it's poor women, black and third world women, and lesbians and trans and many other groups. As I said before, this. In the sense like when we see every time when we establish one ideal, one order, it could be the public space, and it could be the kitchen, it could be many other cases. Every time you establish one ideal, and then there's always something unwanted because you design this for that box, for that groups, and that unwanted and undesirables could always carry on expanding. In that sense, as I think it's not just for women, like, yeah, we have been taught to ignore our differences in the sense it's always a perfect model. And I mean, that has been discussed in film Barbie, but always that's, yeah. And for me, it's really like, it's here, like I found a deep connection between cinema and city in the sense like the production of city and production of film and cinema. As in Italian film scholar Zabantini, if I pronounce the name. Zabantini was commenting on saying like it is a time that comes to tell the audience that they are the true protagonists of life. The result will be a constant appeal to the responsibility and dignity of every human being. Otherwise, the frequent habit of identifying oneself with fictional characters will become very dangerous. We must identify ourselves with what we are. I think in that sense, like when we look at Frankfurt Kitchen, all those kind of ideal and the public space, when you gaze or when you observe that space, are you really seeing yourself? Are you just seeing a model, a perfect model or a perfect lifestyle, and then you are trying to fit in that lifestyle, fit in that discourse? I think that's what Lavatini here is trying to argue about. And for him, like the cinema's overwhelming desire to see, to analyze, and its hunger for reality is an act of complete homage towards other people, this otherness, and towards what is actually happening and existing in the world. And for him, the cinema here, it means the Italian new realism cinema movement, like Room Open City, The Bicycle Thieves, and whose attention of communicating an everyday fact about ordinary people's life differentiated with itself from the American ones, the Hollywood films, which was based on imagination and observe the reality from a distance, rather than really putting the camera in the street and then observing the people's life. And the cinema of Zavantini, it's actually look and contemplate the real life directly. And when he questioned here, what Zavantini questioned here is the very concept of developing a conceived but somewhat purified narrative produced by a so-called technical professional team, professional structure. It could be a screenwriter, it could be the photography director in that Hollywood system. But for him, this kind of realistic film, realistic cinema, it is about acknowledge the differences, acknowledge like it's rather than starting from one model from again. I feel I'm repeating that a lot, the purified model. And this kind of resonates with Sonnet was kind of sarcastic comments on what could be a utopia, what could be a purified city or ideal city, is that people fit together in peace and harmony. A city is so beautiful, like all kinds of different peoples will close their eyes to what they cannot tolerate each other, to the painful fact of their difference, and settle down to the common happiness. In a sense, like what is really a common happiness here, and maybe that's what in this film called Equal is the title of film called Equal is that's dystopian science fiction film. In the near future, like everyone forgets their differences. There's no personal emotions, and as you can see, all equals in that very superficial level of So I think in the book of Sonny's use of disorder, he also mentioned like the danger of this kind of we forget the differences and we forget or we avoid these kind of potential conflicts. As I mentioned before, it's almost like a fear of losing control. But the real city is much more complicated, and the human, any of us sitting here, we are so different with each other. How is it possible to almost give up our own demands and needs and then just trying to force that purified ideal? And in contrast, for Italian films, new realism films, and also many other cinema movements, for example, in Hong Kong, the New Wave cinema and the New Wave cinema, these kind of films, it is about celebrating the differences. And as Zavantini was wrote, to tell the true stories rather than one single story, rather than one single dominant narrative. These stories certainly are not perfect, but often it is this kind of imperfection and the ambiguity that makes us recognize ourselves. Because we are not the perfect role model in many ways. And new realism cinema, therefore, has become a form of social spatial practice. It registers this kind of ambiguity and plurality of everyday urban life, as well as interacting with the lived space of the city rather than a film set, that perfect imagined set. Compare with this kind of technocratic methods of representing city. If anyone can think about Newcastle or any city and they think about the city plan, first of all, you probably in your mind is a map of the city or Google's map of city. But what is really happening in the city is not really just that map. It's in all the street corners, all the dirty coffee cups, all the empty bottles. And that's the life of what's really going on, rather than that also like very official city map. I think that's the for here this kind of difference or contrast between the so-called American ones, the Hollywood system of everything under control, or the purified model of the public urban space in Hong Kong. On the other hand, it is kind of messy, dirty, or even a bit chaotic conflicts and drama. But drama, it is what we are, the drama in many ways. So this kind of sense of inclusion and the plurality of like differs of that kind of dominant purified like the narrative of what the city really means. And in many ways, it creates not just one city. It creates many other cities. In that sense, the city is not just one. It's not only one person's own city. It is a city, as the title of this film. It's a room. It's open city for other people. It's a city of possibilities and otherness. And you see, this is from the poetry of Perrick, which I used for the subtitle of this talk. It's called "On the Difficulty of Imagining an Ideal City." And this one, it's quite beautiful and it's very short. He said, "I wouldn't like to live in the East, but sometimes I would. I love living in France, but sometimes I don't. I'd love to live in Greenland, but not for too long. I'd like to live for 100, but sometimes I wouldn't. I think in this one, it's on one hand suggests for Paris suggests the difficulty of imagining an ideal city because we want so many things at the same time. We want to live in so many cities, and we don't want to live in so many cities at the same time. There's always something you like and something you hate of a city. It's not just one purified, one like certain model there. But for me, on the other hand, it also suggests this kind of real sense of ideal city. In the sense, it's not just one ideal. That's why it's difficult, because it's difficult to imagine an ideal city, because then whose ideal city it is for. But on the other hand, as for me, I found this beautiful sense of freedom in Paris' poetry is that when he mentioned all these options, and that's a real freedom, real like openness, and like I may live here, I may live in there, and that's for me that's actually might be the answer or whatever to this kind of idealistic city. It's about openness, but as I mentioned before, the Italian film, it is not just about one model, it is about alternatives and possibilities. And then in the similar matter, Henri Lefebvre wrote also another very beautiful paragraph in his book, Critique of Everyday Life. He said, the important thing is not that I should become the owner of a little plot of land in the mountain, but that the mountains be open to me and to everyone in this sense. So the notion of private possession becomes more or less meaningless, but what appeal and attraction to the free individual is all the more powerful because of that. So in that sense, carry on with the discussion of, is it just one model, and then if you are just having your own room, and then maybe you are happy with that, but in the public realm, how can we really have an ideal city? What is the public space open to all? It is not like you have your plot there, but rather than have that kind of the process of negotiation, the process of like constantly changing. So in that way, what we are looking at is not really having our own room or plot of land in the city. It is not about constructing our own territory in the city and then becoming the king or even the queen of it. Rather, it is to make the city as open as possible and create many. In that, because if you think about like, I had this conversation before when I did the Tate Liverpool thing, and then sometimes many feminists, like scholars and stuff, argue like, oh, we need to take control back to the city. But always, there's another question there in this sense, like when we see a room of our own, a room of ourselves, when you gain that territory and then you own that territory, once you have that ownership, isn't that a similar structure, similar relationship with the king who was owning that, not allowing other people to do whatever they want? So it's in here, is it really just a gender change or the class change or the race change, or it's actually the structure itself? This is the structure of dominant hegemonic discourse change. I think that's really the core here for what is really ideal, what is really open and inclusive. And in this in the second section, I put David Harvey to see that people need to reclaim the power of choosing their own city they want, and that's the person they want to be. But one cannot really neglect this kind of intersubjectivity, the relational nature of the city, of like any between any human beings. It's not just your city, it's also other people's city, and that is the real core of also the difference maybe between domestic and public realm in the sense what is real sense of publicness. So in that matter, it is the task, I think, or the ultimate task is not really occupy a physical space in the city. Rather, it is occupy a position in this process of production of the city, in this occupy a position in this relationship in the structure. So you are able to participate in the process. You are able to have a dialogue, an equal dialogue with the developers, with architects, with whoever, with the man, with whoever in power. It is about this kind of, again, the openness of including you, and also it's once you are in that conversation, you may also allow other people to participate in. So then it is, as David Harvey again, as he was talking about the right to the city. The right to the city is not only about the right to the access to the land, access to the education resources. It is the right to access this process of city making, and it is a collective effort, a collective action rather than just one person's activity. And compare with the Unam Fantastica, that's a very powerful thing. I want to finish my lecture today or my talk today by a very different clip was shown in I think last year's workshop of Francesca, and which shows that a city of one's own really about, it is about being oneself and finding one's place in this city, in this world, and acknowledging the presence of others as you will see how she's in the street, and then that kind of like knowing the relationship with other people, with the city as well. And dancing in the city and for the city, it is about allowing the possibility of this kind of relationship to happen, this kind of possibility to happen, and this possibility of otherness, of alternatives. As always, I think is a key here. And it is not about a purified ideal, not a perfect city, but it is about a lived city, how we actually living in the city and feel the city. Thank you.
Thank you for the beautiful presentation. Any questions from the audience? I think I will start by asking, you mentioned it's not really we as a researcher, we didn't really recognize the difference, even as female group or LGBTQ group, we really haven't made that effort to recognize the difference in between. So do you have a standard like how to make that approach a more sensible approach for the individualism? And we feel that when it's, we can say yes, that's good enough, and then we say no, you're haven't done enough for this gender.
You mean when you sorry. Yes, I mean what if you mean like in this when you're having a conversation, if it's really inclusive enough or not? Is that what you mean?
I remember you have one slide that even there's a woman, there's a black, there's probably Asian, it's probably white, it's probably poor, it's probably living in the city or living in a suburban area.
Yeah, I think in the sense like it's very nice. Someone actually once said it's part of the thing. Sorry, I'm gonna quote, but since when we talk about urban, I'm gonna use urban planning as a case. When we talk about urban planning, it's not called urban plan. It's called urban planning. It's always a process. So in that sense, like it's not about like it's done, it's this, and then have we included enough or not. It should always be an open field. That's why it is a process of happening. That's why for public space in my pitch also I mentioned the public needs. It's not, there's no certain notion or definition of public needs. The only thing is it's the process of negotiation. And it's always, there's always conflicts. There's always conflicts there. That's why in the sense of in the film, in the Italian new realism films, it's, and always if you find in those kind of films, realistic films, there's not many, normally there's no solution in the end of film. It's against those kind of the typical, you have the story and then you have the plot developing and then you have the peak and then the drama and then you have a solution of the story. But in the realistic films, normally there's no solution in the end because what is the solution for us for today? We have a dinner and then we sleep and tomorrow we carry on life. But that's actually I think in that sense like what is really the solution of have we include more than enough people enough like poor or the white or the black or the Asian or all that. I think that's always, it's a dialogue rather than, yeah. I don't know if I answer your question.
Yeah, and I think Jennifer a little bit touched on that, and it was very clear from your presentation that opening up to a more intersectional approach rather than just talking about the feminist way of doing is a very key point here, because there is a lovely, it's an important piece of work by an Italian philosopher. It's based at the New School in New York, and she's called Chiara Bottici, who wrote in 2022 a booklet. It's like 100 pages, which are like the most revolutionary book in the last 5 years, I think, which is named the Manifesto Anarcha-Feminist, because what she says is basically that the feminist city, or the feminism in general, is not about the liberation, the making the women free, but it's about making everybody free. It is very, very, very much connected to your kind of approach when you obviously mentioned that this is for women, as for the LGBTQ+, as for the different social classes, everything really come into this big definition that is the feminist way of doing. And what I found really, as a designer, as an architect, what I really found inspirational and provocative is the role that architecture plays in defining our attitude towards the public and the domestic as well. Because the way we design can really make a huge difference, like in that photo frame from Equals, where everybody is dressed all the same, all white. Architecture does speak the same language. And it's impressive because today we are very much used to produce this custom copy architecture, and the artificial intelligence that is supposed to support the way we design, is actually iterating and reinforcing the idea that architecture can actually be the same everywhere. And that photo frame was quite shocking in this sense. So what is the role that architects and designers and policymakers and whoever really, because it is a very interdisciplinary audience today, what we can do to shape that built environment, whether it is public or domestic, to enable the change?
Yeah, I think actually this, one of my students, when he produced writing his ESCC style, and his topic is AI, artificial intelligence, and the role of architects. Why architects are so scared of that? This is happening. And he had very interesting, we had this very interesting conversation, is that maybe architects scared of that is because, like, in a sense, yeah, the AI can do the thing that we can do in many ways, but what's really the role of architect is not about design that perfect box. It's actually provide that kind of agency and provide what's happening inside the box. So, and in the sense, it's not about the kind of, again, purify the idea of the thing, because that's very easy. It's just about code and the principle. You have this, you have this, you have this, and then it's done. It's done. But what is really difficult is to develop this container of human drama, of these conflicts, of these relationships. I think that's. I forgot actually. I think you mentioned, Nadia, you mentioned a rule. I forgot one slide, which I mentioned about the Frankfurt kitchen of one example of, at that time, so-called feminist architecture practice. Actually, there's another one having in, it's Zhuozhang Li, I don't know if you heard of the name, it's one female architect in China, southwest China, in the mountain area with a village. And what she did is, she didn't really design any specific building, but what she did is that she go to the village, talk with all the women and all the people, because in those areas, normally, of course, it's a man who do the concrete, who do the construction works. And then when women in that setting have no kind of have no space to speak up, to say, oh, maybe I want this or I want that. So what she did, she went to the village, went to the settlements, and then was teaching all the women group. And she set up a female construction group. And then actually, once she's teaching them how to use the new materials, teaching them how to actually the new technique, all the things. And actually, in the end, what happening now in this area is actually the female have much more power than the man, because they know the new material, they know the new technique, they own more money, and they have more projects. I think that's really, in the sense, of an interesting role of architects, because when we talk architects, in a metaphor, architect of the city, it's not just architect, it's not about building, it's about the blueprint or the plan or whatever, the vision of the city. So maybe architects this all, yeah.
It would be nice because we're obviously talking about something that we all kind of experience every day. On our hands as an architects, we are the ones supposed to grow the city, but for those who are not architects, it's anyway something that you experience on a daily basis. So I wonder if there are any comments or suggestions or questions about how you feel these issues about gender or discrimination in general in the city, or in the way we design the domestic environment in relation to your experience as a designer or as a user of the city. Of policymakers.
I can talk from a justice-based sustainable development and urban planning perspective. And what I would say in my perspective is there's some really good work taking place in the States, in Boston at the moment. So you've got the likes of Loretta Lees at Boston University, who is talking about themes of super-gentrification and the problems of the hegemony of corporations and their influence on policy making, and how they can start to unpack some of those tensions in those spaces. Because, for example, in the real estate sector and in terms of development can take place pretty rapidly without really thinking about, in Boston, Massachusetts specifically, the racial disparities, for example, and the socioeconomic disparities that come from legacies of injustice and legacies of racial segregation. So I think it's really interesting, your work that you've brought forward here, because it gets you to think about who has the power, who has the agency, how can you be more inclusive, even when you know that you are working within city environments that are organic, that are ever-changing, that are fluid, and will still have these power disparities, because corporations tend to have such influence and power on policy making. So where I think the multidisciplinarity of the built environment is really special. It's very, it's a space in which there are many contested spaces, there are many differences, but those differences can be in. Last Friday in Manchester of the Aviva Studios, you know, the hip hop dance of the, no, anyone, the Matrix? No, nobody. What's going on? It's the biggest urban art space in Europe, and it's just opened up. It's sorry, I'm not an advert for them, but it's just so massive. Danny Boyle, Lock, Stock and Two, Three Stones. Anyway, but what I'm trying to say is reclaiming these spaces and recognising the complexities and the hegemony of corporations is quite interesting. And I think the role as architects, designers, artists, human beings, our everydayisms, our lived experiences can really enrich urban planners, the academic conversations, the debates in these contested spaces. Sorry, I could go on forever. I loved your presentation. I thought it was really interesting, especially Virginia Woolf, because a room of one's own. Unpacking that, a lifetime. Anyway.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I think this one in my research also, like, I mean, also in our city, we always talk about, you mentioned, like, very important parties, like sometimes the cooperative, they actually have very big power, and also similar with all the so-called collective in many ways. They are meant to see the collective itself is private, it's not very public, because it's for the specific group of people. And we also have this kind of the critique of so-called creative industry or creative education group of people. For example, in Sweden, also in many other places, you have this city, have this space of this creative quarter, and then like, oh, it's brilliant, it's urban common and things. But then who actually the people who's going there is the people who know there's something happening there, and who have actually the freedom, have the free time, have even the money to actually pay the transportation to go there and to spend the time with the kids. But then there are actually many other people who are still not in that dialogue. I think it's also, again, so that's why I said, like, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. No, and I think you're absolutely right, because the political economy shapes very much almost every aspect of how you can actually function and the level of agency. So, and culture, of course. So your New York City with increased pedestrianisation is great, but you've still got, sorry, I was there earlier this year, you've still got such injustice going on the ground, like you showed with the cardboard boxes and making spaces. You're finding barriers where migrants can't get into hotels, so they're making those spaces for themselves. They're pulling out their prayer mats to pray. And then you might have cities in the global south, like from where I'm from, where just being a woman in the city, you have to act in a certain way, you have to veil yourself, you know, etc. So I think it's super, super interesting. Yeah. Sorry.
Any other response or questions to Zhuozhang? So next, would you like to talk about your event?
Such a good design.
So, hello, my name's Flores, and on the 3rd of November, I hosted a gender walk around the Newcastle City Centre as part of research for my master's dissertation, looking into gender bias within planning policy and sort of how that manifests itself in design of the city centre, and how that can potentially be improved, and we can bring like gender consideration into policy and frameworks that help shape the built environment. So yeah, if you would like to come along, if you are sick of living in Camden and would like a bit more equality, like in Barbie Land, please come along on the 3rd of November at 2:30, and we're going to meet outside Solar Building. So yeah.